First of all, comment below on what you think the proper pronunciation is. Is it WiiM or WiiM? Whether we get it right or not, let's get to the bottom of this. So I was kind of expecting the WiiM amp, we're going to call it the WiiM amp for this video, that it was going to show up today. And I had a box show up at my house. I went out there to check it out and I picked it up and I was like, oh, this is actually kind of a heavy box. I'm not sure what else I'd be getting today. I tend to get a lot of things in, but I wasn't expecting anything else today. So when I actually opened it up, to my surprise, it was the new WiiM amp. And first impressions before anything else, this thing is actually pretty heavy. This product is starting to feel a lot more mainstream when you look at everything, the entire build and package. It almost feels Apple-esque. And when you actually pick up the new WiiM amp, you'll be greeted with a much heavier, premium looking product than you might be expecting. And a lot of that can be explained because the power supply is integrated on this rather than a separate power brick, as well as the aluminum case rather than plastic. That really makes a product look a lot better than a simple plastic little square. If we want to take a look at some of the highlights on this one, the 100-foot view, it's the WiiM streamer almost everyone enjoys, now paired with a 3255 amp chip, which isn't uncommon today. It's the chip we find in products like the V3, the A07 series, and the new Fozzy ZA3. But what separates this one from the pack is a few things. A top-notch streaming platform for one, a sub out with a selectable crossover, meaning you get bass management when paired with an external sub. Hand off those low frequencies to the sub where it excels, and let your speakers handle everything else. And the big one for a lot of people with soundbar replacement dreams, HDMI ARC. Not eARC, but that isn't necessary for this one in this use case. Looking at the front, it's really simple, and the way most of us use this, it's unlikely you'll even need any of this functionality, but we have the volume dial that doubles as a multifunction button, long press for setup and reset activities, a quick press for play and pause. The input selections are represented by this light here. The volume also has LED indicators, letting you know where you're at. And I say you may not even use the front features because the way I personally envision using this is setting the standby time to a couple of minutes so I can just have it turn off on its own and it'll simply power on with my TV or the activation of the streaming software. As this is equipped with HDMI ARC, I'll likely just use my TV remote for most things. And since this also does come with the WiiM remote, everything else can be handled from your seat. Operate everything from the app or the remote. And you can turn off the lights in the front if you desire to, the status lights and the volume indicator. I don't mind either, they're not overly bright and obnoxious, but if you have it close to your TV screen, it could be a distraction in some cases. So a nice feature to have. On that same topic of lights, I do wish they changed the lighting on the front when it goes into standby, like turn off the volume indicators and possibly go to a red light on the input light. Right now, you don't really have any indication that it went into standby. It's likely working just fine. Mine is set to 2 minutes of inactivity, but it would be nice to have a visual representation. Looking at the back, we have an improvement in the binding posts. Not in the sense an improvement from WiiM products, as this is the first product with binding posts from them, but certainly of higher quality than many of the little class D amps making the rounds. Cover everything else, we have the HDMI ARC port like I mentioned, the power input for the built-in power supply. No word on the size of that yet, but we're getting roughly 60 watts per channel at 8 ohms and 120 at 4, so that should give you at least a pretty good idea based on other 3255 amps on the market. We also have a wired Ethernet connection, USB for things like connecting your external library, analog inputs, and an optical input. Last but not least, that ever so important sub out. If this would have just been a standard sub out sending full range, it would have been fine, but as WiiM generally goes a step beyond, their software gave us gain controls, a crossover, and even phase adjustments right from the app. The reason I keep highlighting the sub with bass management is that it really elevates a product like this. If you take the low frequencies away from the speakers and let the subs pound away, it really frees up the wattage for everything else and in turn lowers the distortion. It's really a win-win. You get a properly integrated sub and you get more clean wattage out of your amp for your speakers. It's certainly not the only budget option with bass management, but very few offer selectable options. If they offer anything at all, it's generally a single frequency cut, like 80 or 100 hertz, for example, which won't give you much flexibility in your tuning. Are we missing anything here? Yes and no. Digital out would have been really handy here to bypass the internal DAC for something of your choosing, but it's not like they gave us a nameless chip here. It's the ESS 9018. It's a bit older of a DAC chip, but it's certainly not a slouch either. As of a few years back, this was a flagship DAC chip, used in many really high-end products. At the same time, I get it though. People like their own flavor, and I can see where it would have been nice to offer that flexibility here. And knowing WiiM, we'll probably get it next time. I also need to mention the chip isn't everything here. The implementation is actually more meaningful generally. Just a disclaimer. On this same topic, let's throw in some pre-outs as well, take advantage of the awesome streaming software, HDMI and sub out, and open it up to an amplifier of our choosing. At the same time, this does do everything I need it to within my expectations of a $300 device. In fact, it blows away pretty much everything at this price point. It's not difficult to name another amp at this price, but try to come up with one that actually has a good streaming software built in. It's an all-in-one box solution. You could piece together something comparable with separates, but that's not really the purpose here. This is a polished solution. Open the box, have it running in 5 minutes kind of thing. Now let's take a look at what we get with this one. The amp itself, of course. And it's so nice having an amp that I don't have to weigh down or use blue tack on the bottom to keep it in place. It's so annoying when you press a button on something and the amp slides around, or the cables in the back have it doing a wheelie. It's the little things, isn't it? The accessories that came with this one were remote. It's the same one that's been offered in their other products. Volume, track controls, inputs, favorites, and voice control with a built-in mic. Remote quality is actually pretty decent on these, certainly a step above what's included from budget amps or even SMSL for that matter. We also get an RCA, optical, and HDMI cable, so it's really everything you need to get going as long as the lengths are alright for your use case. Now onto some comparables. And I don't really have anything on hand that directly competes with this at its price range. And well, that's because said products don't really exist. Let's take a quick look though over at Crutchfield, where the WiiM amp is actually sold now. There's a leap in itself, showing just how mainstream WiiM has become. I personally think it's the software. People are really taking notice. What I wanted to do here was go to the WiiM amp product page and see what this is frequently compared with. First up, the Yamaha WXA50. Right off the bat, I can say similar wattage, little lower than the WiiM amp, only a 3-band EQ, no HDMI, and MusicCast for a streaming solution. I'm going to take the WiiM software hands down here, and coming in at $600, double the price, that's a simple one for myself. It actually doesn't look like a bad piece of gear, but this is all going to be about value here. Next up, the Sonos amp, coming in at $699. This one does have a power advantage though, 125 watts at 8 ohms, HDMI, and the entire Sonos environment. This one is actually a much closer comparison on offerings, well, everything outside of the price being more than double. These are popular for a reason, they work well, but a quick search did find a kink in the armor beyond the price. 1648 is the max bitrate and sample rate on these, so take note of that if that's a factor for you. Blue Sound has the power edge, another good comparison actually, HDMI ARC in this case, adjustable sub out, good software, down on power though, coming in at 40 watts per channel into 8 ohms. And once again, it commands a $649 price tag. The real question people need to start asking is why? If anything, the WiiM amp should be opening your eyes to the fallacies that many of these companies are putting in front of us. Products that are fine and work well, but are simply overpriced. I wholeheartedly welcome the WiiMs going mainstream into places like Crutchfield to start putting pressure on the other brands to give us more for the money. I have no problem spending more if I get something in return, but to spend a premium on mediocrity, that's another story altogether. SVS has a product too here. It's the Soundbase. It sounds good, but the streaming platform is a bit rough. Play-Fi, so I'm not even going to get into it. And if you're interested where I'm going to use this, I'm going to be using this as a soundbar replacement in a smaller space where I also spend a lot of time listening to music. It's really the perfect solution in an area I want to keep things minimalistic. I'm all for building a system with separates and all that, it can be a lot of fun, but some spaces just call for a simple integration, good sound from the TV, and a simple input change over to streaming over Tidal and Amazon in my case. If you have any concerns about power, I can tell you in my space I was able to get plenty loud driving bookshelf as well as floor standing speakers. And like I mentioned earlier, if you have a difficult to drive speaker or plan to be in a space requiring a lot of volume, bring in the sub, set in that crossover. It really opens the capabilities here. The sound review won't take much time. It sounds a lot like other 3255 implementations. It doesn't have any overpowering digital sound, you know, the artifact distortion type sound, but it also doesn't escape the known challenges of a lot of these amps. The frequency response will be influenced by the load impedance. Certain speakers will be impacted more, but I hardly found this to be an issue, at least during my pairings. Plenty of clean power. I was pushing a pair of KLH Kendall floor standing speakers to a volume level that would be uncomfortable for any length of time in a smaller room. As long as you don't need to fill a giant room or a warehouse, it's likely going to cover your bases here. It sounds like it's supposed to. 3255 amps sound pretty good in general. It may not be quite up there with the new Fozzy ZA3 sound straight out of the box, but with some of the fine tuning and bass management that's available in the WiiM amp, you can actually get a more polished, technically correct sound out of this with a little bit of tuning. Really, the end of the day here is you can get something that sounds as good or better, but you can't get something that sounds as good as this does and also gives you everything else it offers. And I didn't even cover everything today, but to give you a quick rundown on some of the other features, if you're not familiar with WiiM products, of course we get the great streaming platform. We also get voice control over Alexa, Google Assistant, or Siri. We have EQ options, 24 presets. We get a 10-band EQ or 4-band parametric EQ for more extensive tuning, which hardly anyone offers. USB file playback, Chromecast, multi-room audio playback capabilities. There's really a lot to offer here. If I was going to change anything here, it's the two obvious ones that I mentioned above, a digital output to open up the DAC selections, and pre-outs to expand the amp capabilities. I think the 3255 is a good chip. It sounds good, performs well, and it's likely the right choice to stay within this price point. But pre-outs would really make this the creme de la creme or something like that. Keep this one in mind if you're shopping soundbars or looking for that simple TV and streaming integration. It's about as high value as you can get in today's offerings. Thanks for watching today. Please like and subscribe so we can grow this channel together. More subscribers opens up my channel's ability to get in more gear, so I greatly appreciate it. Take care. Have a good one. See ya.